It's 8 o'clock. We'll call the committee to order, and I'll ask Janet if she'll do a roll call.
Kathy Leaf.
Here.
Paul Burning.
He's excused.
Bob Fiedler.
Here.
Dan Hansen.
Here.
Shelley Tomczyk.
Excused.
Here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Shelley came on. Very good. Okay, approval of our minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a motion for that? Dan's made a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Was that Shelley or Kathy? Kathy. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? And they're approved. Any public comment? Any public comment? Any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll go immediately to our county administrator, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. In your packets, you have the financial reports for the public protection and judiciary departments. This reflects revenues and expenditures for each department through the end of March. So it reflects 3 months of expenditures and revenues for each of the departments. I've gone through each of the departments. If you use 3 months as a benchmark, we were looking at in the area of 75% of budget remaining for both revenues and expenditures. I've gone through each of the departments' budget, and for all the departments, we are in excess of 75% remaining for expenditures. The circuit court is at 90% remaining for expenditures, which is good. The clerk of courts is at 85% remaining for expenditures. The medical examiner is at 93% of budget. There we look at, in the medical examiner's budget, we keep a close eye on the other professional services line item, which is where we budget for autopsies. And we've only expended, at least reflected through the end of March in this report, $7,000 year to date for that line item, which is one we keep an eye on closely. CJCC, they are at 74% remaining for expenditures, so right in line with where they should be. District Attorney, 83% remaining. Child support, they are at 84% of budget. A lot of the revenues in child support, if you look closely at that, much of their funding comes through the state, and their budget actually, revenues exceed expenditures. So you see under property tax revenue for the child support division, you actually see a negative number, which means that when we build their budget, when Lisa builds the department budget, her revenues actually exceed total expenditures. Law enforcement, which is the sheriff's office, they are at 81% of budget remaining for expenditures, and in corrections in the jail, 80% remaining. Emergency management, again, revenues heavily dependent on grant revenues. A lot of those revenues don't show up in the first quarter. They show up later in the fiscal year. So they typically will lag behind in revenues, but by year end, we collect 100% of budgeted revenues. They are at 85% budget remaining for expenditures. And lastly, emergency communications. That's our 911 center. They are 93% budget remaining through the first 3 months of the year. So all the departments are well within budgeted revenues and expenditures. I don't see any line items that are, at this point in the year, which is early, showing any stress. But that could change in several of our departments by the middle towards the end of the year. So we'll keep it, as I said the other evening at County Board, we'll keep a very close eye on all the departments' budgets. If there's any work or action that needs to be taken by the board regarding any of the budgets throughout the course of the year, I would notify the committees and the county board if we're having problems. But at this point, things look okay.
Thank you, Administrator Thompson. That's a good report. I had thought, given our the crisis we've been through, we might see some more negative numbers, but that's very positive.
It's still very early on, and this only reflects the first 3 months, and so it'll show up. It'll show up later in the year, but so far, so good.
I just had one more question before I'll ask if there's any other questions for you, and that is, this committee also has as one of its functions a role as emergency management. Can you just comment briefly, because I know that the county board in March, anticipating the crisis by resolution, gave you extraordinary authority, which it should have done. I strongly supported it, to act over the next few months of the emergency. Can you just comment on what role this committee you would anticipate it might have in working with you, or what it could do in the future or should be doing now?
Well, I don't know if Natasha is here. She is online. Good morning, Natasha. Your
Good
role,
morning.
and Natasha.
I'm sorry, the audio's pretty bad from my phone, so I didn't hear what the question was.
Do you want to repeat your question, Mr. Chairman?
Good morning, Natasha. This committee also has responsibility in the emergency management area, and we had done some extraordinary things at the county board in March to make sure that we got through the emergency in expedited fashion by giving the county administrator unique powers for a period of time. And my question to him was simply, does he see a role for this committee as he exercises his powers, or in the near future? Is there anything we should be doing now to be helpful?
All right, I think, do you guys want me to come upstairs because I cannot understand the question? Do you want me to come up, or I can come upstairs?
Why don't you come up, Natasha? I'll start answering
I'm
the
sorry.
question by the time
Thank you.
I get done rambling. You should be here. The role of this committee, see, the LEPC, which is another committee of the county board, it's a standing committee. Well, technically not one of the 5 standing committees, but it's a statutorily defined committee, which the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee is the parent committee over LEPC. Some of the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee members sit on the LEPC, along with myself, the sheriff, Natasha, who else in this group? Yeah, I think there's even some others from the Public Protection and Judiciary. So they meet, I want to say quarterly, is that correct, Janet, or twice a year? Okay. And Natasha staffs that committee very closely. And the role of this committee basically is to oversee the budget and policy of the emergency management. And so if there's any policy direction, any approvals of the county board for grants or funding, the budget for emergency management all flows through this committee and ultimately the county board of supervisors. And so you play a very vital role in terms of policy guidance and oversight, direction, leadership for emergency management. Operationally, the committee does not play an active role operationally, but more of a policy body. Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry, it was really London downstairs.
It's like, good morning. And so Pat has given a very good explanation of our role in emergency management, basically relative to policy and oversight of the LEPC. And I have attended several of their meetings. I'll just let the new members of the committee know. And it does meet twice a year in this room, usually about 15 to 20 people from the emergency services areas. Natasha, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we have Natasha Cardinal with us, who is the staff member for the emergency services. And if you have any additional comment you'd like to make, it's welcome. Otherwise, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Just in regards to the role
Yeah,
for this
of
committee?
this committee.
No, I think Pat described it perfectly from what I caught.
Okay.
Good answer.
Yeah.
That's, oh, I'm sorry, Pat, go ahead.
Do you want to, are you going to be giving a report this morning? That's my other question before. Otherwise, are you going to be giving a staff report?
Natasha will be with us in June.
Well, pardon?
In June,
Oh, she won't be today?
that's correct.
Well, as long as you're here, Natasha, maybe give a very brief explanation of what your department is currently
What we're
involved
working
in.
on
Yeah.
and how we're involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have our EOC partially activated in coordination with public health. And public health is running the show pretty much, and so we support them at all levels. And what we've been really busy with in the last week is coordinating the National Guard to come out and do 2 testing sites. So a lot of hand-in-hand public health authorities, emergency management we are the ones who can do the requests for state assets and resources. So I help do resource requests, and we're going to run the 2 testing sites and support with the National Guard on Friday and Saturday. We're doing a pre-site visit with the National Guard today at both sites, logistically getting everything set up and ready to go. Weekly, lots of calls between several different agencies and organizations with public health. We have our Healthcare Emergency Readiness Coalition, our hospital clinic calls, our infection control calls, public health emergency management, daily briefings with the State Emergency Operations Center. So there's a lot of situation awareness that's being passed and shared. And then weekly, we do municipality, school administrators, school districts, and first responder calls so that everyone in the county can also receive that situational awareness. And it's not just what's happening on a day-to-day basis, but also what other state agencies are doing. So like the DNR, the Badger Bounce Back program, could be school food benefits programs. So a lot of information is being shared, and it's changing by the day. So, yep.
Natasha, Pat, appreciate that very much, and all you folks have done over the last month. I just open it up to the other committee members for any observations or comments they would have to Ms. Cardinal or Administrator Thompson.
One suggestion I would have for committee members, occasionally, I don't know in this 2020 with what's going on, I mean, we're actually living a tabletop exercise day in and day out. I mean, Natasha's actually living it, but in a normal year, her department will conduct what we call tabletop exercises, which is she will take the county through an emergency, and it will be a tabletop exercise to plan for emergencies. And when and if we get back to a situation where we have a practice tabletop rather than a real one, which we're living in, I would suggest to take on an observational role for the committee. Her department will define what official roles the county leaders have in a tabletop exercise, but there's always the opportunity, if you don't have an official role, to take on a observation role, and it's very educational. And I think if you want to see your staff performing, a lot of staff from various departments performing and practicing and learning and planning for what is actually happening now, that would be highly beneficial when and if we have a scheduled exercise.
That's an excellent recommendation. I'm sure we'll take you up on that. Again, any questions from the Supervisor Hanson?
So the baton was passed to Administrator Thompson because things are happening so quickly. We need to have policy made on the fly, and I couldn't be more comfortable with that being done by a more professional person than Patrick. Thank you for being there.
Well, it's the staff. Thank you.
The one puzzle piece that I'm looking forward to having in place is having a communicator to field those calls, so Natasha can be doing the actual work. And when will we get that public relations person online?
We're very, very, very close to having a public information officer. I can't make any announcement this morning, but we're very close. And it came up again yesterday. I mean, there was a need for a informational piece that would have been very effectively performed by a professional, where I had to ask a staff person to do it, which it'll be done right, but it's something that is typically not part of her responsibility to do what I asked her to do.
I see my role is just to stay the heck out of your way, and if you need me, you'll call me.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we're going to proceed by asking Judge Needham to give a report on the circuit court, and typically that also slides into the CJCC with either the judge or Michael Keefe giving a report. Then we'll turn to Mike Niskes, to our medical examiner, and then to the sheriff's office in that order. And so I'll turn it over to Judge Needham, the Chief Judge of the Circuit Court.
Thank you. And first, I really appreciate the opportunity to basically just give an outline as to who we are. And looking at the committee members, I think the chairman is the only carryover member of this committee from the prior board, and I think 3 of the members are new to at least county government. So it gives me a chance to introduce my department as well as share at least some thoughts. The courts, I think everyone probably recognizes, has a status as a department unlike any other department in the county because we're a separate but equal branch of government. And so we have this relationship with the county as partners regarding our operations, dependent on the county for our funding generally. But I can say in my tenure, which is now just short of 26 years, our relationship with the county board is excellent. It's born, I think, from the foundation of mutual respect and cooperation that we've had with every county board, and I have every reason to believe this county board as well, the county administrator. So first, a thank you to the county board, because as chief judge of the district for a number of years, I know that's not the case in other counties where there is tension and conflict and competition, but in St. Croix we are quite honestly blessed to have that type of working relationship with the county and the county board. The courts, I think, as everyone know, we have 4 circuit court judges, a part-time family court commissioner, part-time commissioner, and our staff then by legal assistants, register and probate, a juvenile clerk. And it's a department, again, which has grown in my tenure. When we moved into this building, we had 2 judges and 4 courtrooms, and never thought we would outlive our space. By '94, we had added a 3rd judge, and then I believe in 2006, we added our 4th judge, and we're at capacity. Likewise, we have 2 hearing rooms which operate at capacity as well. The courts also, as I said, have a unique financial relationship with the county because all the judges and our court reporters, and each judge has their own court reporter, either stenographer or a digital recording reporter, are state employees. And our salaries and benefits are paid by the state. Every other funding for the courts comes from the county. So that includes the building, it includes certainly all of our staff, our supplies. Exempted from that are also our computer systems. The state, a number of years ago, I believe about the time I came on the bench, decided that the court should have a secure computer system. So all of our hardware, all of our software, all of our maintenance of our computer systems are maintained by the state. So that's an expense, again, that the county does not bear, but one, again, that the state has shouldered for a number of reasons, primarily security. As I said, we prepare a budget and we come to the county board with our budget to take care of those other types of costs and responsibilities. I would also encourage any member of the board, but certainly members of this committee, that if any time you would like to participate in what we call a ride-along, where county board members literally come up and sit on the bench with any one of the judges, that you are certainly welcome to do that. I always suggest Child Support Tuesday is a good time to come up and observe court because it's a rather unique cross-section of the population that we see. But an intake, anything that we do, we would encourage you to come up because it gives you, I think, a unique perspective for what we do and what we see in terms of our interactions with the public as well as the professional staff of the bar. Courts during COVID. As I think we all know, as of March 23, our lives were turned upside down as an institution. We were quite literally flying by the seat of our pants. When we would get information, one day it would change the next. And I don't know how many times I was in Administrator Thompson's office trying to figure out what is this going to look like, what is going to work, keeping in mind our need, our constitutional responsibility to keep the courts open, which was a mandate and certainly recognized by the Supreme Court in all the orders that they issued. And so I've issued more orders since March 23 than I think I've issued in my 26 years. And it seems like every week we're putting out a new order as to how courts are going to operate and what's going to happen. Since March 23, and I just got the numbers yesterday, our capacity as courts has been at 25%. So if we take a 5-year running average of court activities and what we would generally do in any particular week, we're at 25%. Now, that is easily explained because when we went to phase 4, I believe it was, Pat, we made the decision to cut to half days and to cut to half staff. So you do the math, and that's going to result in about 25% production. We concluded about 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, we could not maintain at that capacity. We were going to topple over of our own weight. You just can't keep pushing things out and kicking the can down the road. So we made the decision to go back to full capacity, full staffing as of last Friday, May 1st. So we're hopeful that we can maintain, but even maybe start to chip away at what has occurred regarding court functioning. Pursuant to the Supreme Court rule, which was entered in late March, all jury trials have been suspended in the state of Wisconsin. That includes speedy trial demands in criminal cases, include mental commitments, jury trials. Any jury trial has been suspended. So we've not had to deal with that issue of bringing jurors in and making people feel safe, but at the same time fulfilling their civic responsibility. Now that order of the court is set to sunset, I believe it's on May 22nd. We've not heard from the court as to if they're going to extend that or if they're going to provide some other direction to us. So we are at least trying to plan for how we get back to conducting jury trials and how we get back to conducting other court proceedings. The other thing that the court did in March was to eliminate all in-person court appearances, which was totally foreign to this judge because we do everything in person. We have people in our courtrooms, we have that interaction where we see each other and we can engage in those types of discussions and conversations. The court concluded that to keep staff safe, to keep litigants safe, to keep judges and attorneys safe, we would do everything by Zoom or other means of technology. It's challenging. I think Ms. Tomczyk and anyone would acknowledge it's not ideal, but we're making it work. Now, there are certain exceptions that the court has carved out for in-person appearances, but it's maybe 5% of what we do. Everything else is being done remotely. And I can't, again, thank John Allegro and IT enough for stepping up and helping us try to figure this out and getting that technology in place to operate Zoom. I had 15 people on a Zoom hearing the other day. I don't want to ever do that again, but we made it through it. We've had to do cases where we have Spanish-speaking people with interpretation by Zoom, and you can only imagine the challenge in trying to conduct a hearing with interpretation, albeit by Zoom technology. The court, I believe, is going to be meeting this week to decide again how long we continue this suspension of in-person appearances. I'm on a task force that the Chief Justice formed about a week and a half ago, and it's made up of the Dean of the UW Medical School, the virologist, worldwide known from the university, judges, public defenders, private attorneys, sheriff. We have representation pretty much from all the stakeholders, a group of 25. And we have been meeting generally 2 times a week, and the purpose of that task force is to design plans for each of our counties to reopen safely for both in-person appearances, jury trials, facilities, equipment. In other words, what will we need going forward to get the courts open? And the plan is to have our report out by next week. So it's been extremely aggressive. 2.5 weeks, we're going to have a report out to the Supreme Court. The idea behind it is to not come up with a one-size-fits-all, but to provide guidelines for each of the 72 counties. Because Milwaukee is a state unto itself, and how they operate is totally different from St. Croix, is different from Iron, is different from Sawyer. So we're trying to provide some guidelines as well as recommendations about, given your facilities, given your staff, given your resources, how can we now get the courts open for in-person appearances and open for jury trials? I'm on the jury trial re-engagement subcommittee, and it's challenging. How do you have social distancing with a jury trial where we have a jury box with 12 chairs that are, a foot apart? So we, in all likelihood, will be using the gallery to seat jurors and use half the courtroom just for our jury. Do we mask? Do we use air purifiers? Everything, again, that we know is being recommended, but how do you make that fit in a setting and an environment where we've never had to face these types of challenges going forward? So as I said, hopefully by the end of next week, we'll have some idea as to when the courts will be reopening to in-person, when we'll be reopening for jury trials, And then the challenge will become convincing citizens that it's safe, that we're going to protect them as best we can to come into a courtroom and to serve as a juror. So it's going to be education, public service, you name it, we're looking at alternatives. The other thing that I want to share is it's been challenging to conduct our specialty courts. So if you're not aware, in addition to what we do as calendars, we have 3 specialty courts that are running, a drug court, an alcohol court, and a domestic violence court. And those have been running remotely as well. But again, it's the interaction that is critical to those types of courts. But for now, Judge Waterman and Judge Vlack are conducting those courts, albeit remotely. I think, as you probably also know, our day report center effectively shut down when COVID happened. So we had I don't know how many people testing, Sheriff, but hundreds of people testing at the day report center for the safety of the sheriff's deputies, for the safety of the jail, for the safety of people who are coming in to test. Again, we met with the sheriff and concluded that we could not have these in-person testing going on. So we basically eliminated all the in-person testing, and we've had people now calling in. We've had people equipped with alcohol monitors if it's an alcohol case. But it represents public safety concerns for us without having this testing going on. Same thing for drug court. They're not testing. And so we have the challenges that I've explained. DRC now is back up and operating at the service center in Richmond because it's a bigger space where we can maintain social distancing and put in place some safety mechanisms, but it will not be at the capacity certainly of what we're doing here. And I think it's designed primarily for the high-risk individuals who we just have concluded we have to test them for their safety as well as for public safety. So that's probably longer than what you wanted to hear from me about what's happening in the courts, but I would encourage any of you, to come up and talk to me or one of my colleagues. I'm what you call a presiding judge. I'm appointed by the chief judge of the district to preside in St. Croix County, and that simply means that I get all the phone calls, but I can tell you that the working relationship with Judge Waterman, Judge Vlack, and Judge Nordstrand is the strongest collegial staff I've had in my 26 years of working with colleagues and all of us being on the same page. I can't also thank Mike O'Keefe enough for being the shelter in the storm throughout a lot of this. Mike, as head of our CJCC, he works without my directing him. As I said, I've got enough on my plate that I don't have to worry about what's happening with CJCC because Mike has really stepped up and taken on that responsibility without a lot of input from me. So that's my report. If you have questions, I'm certainly happy to field them.
Judge, I thought we might do this if it's okay with you, unless you'd like to give the overview. Maybe we could turn to Mike O'Keefe real quickly, give a quick overview of what's happening with CJCC while the chairman of the CJCC is with us, the chief judge, and then open it up to questions after that. If that's satisfactory with everybody, Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The St. Croix County Community Justice Collaborating Council, better known as the CJCC, was established by a county board resolution in 2013. Keep in mind, the mission of the CJCC exists to promote the safety of the citizens of St. Croix County and provide direction, leadership, and a vision for an improved justice system. Currently, there are 19 voting members on the CJCC Council. We started with 15 back in 2014. The council meets 6 times per year, and all of our meetings are posted on our county's IQM2 system to adhere to open records requirements, open meeting requirements. The CJCC Council provides oversight to 7 subcommittees: the executive, community engagement, criminal justice, domestic violence, mental health, substance abuse, and treatment courts. The executive Committee provides oversight to the CJCC budget as well as treatment alternatives and diversion grant budget. We do receive approximately $154,000 per year from the TAD grant to provide 2 positions, one in the DA's office, a diversion case management specialist, and a Compass court caseworker. To qualify for this grant, we must maintain an operating, functioning CJCC. Otherwise, the Department of Justice probably would not fund this. The Executive Committee also develops agendas for council meetings and takes actions on other business items as prescribed in the bylaws. The committee meets 10 times per year, the Executive Committee, and on this committee is Judge Needham, our presiding judge, Kate Avalos, our Bar Association representative, Dave Peterson, our new county board chair, Michael Nieskus, our district attorney, and Pat Thompson, our county administrator. In 2013, Sheriff John Schultz and Clerk of Court Laurie Myer requested a technical assistance grant from the National Institute of Corrections called NIC to give us an overall assessment of how we were operating as a justice system. After a 2-day interview with people from Colorado, they concluded that we are very professional and we're capable, dedicated staff, but we tended to work in silos. To that end, the CJCC has moved towards a data-driven system now, where we use data to drive all of our decisions. Over the past 6 years, we've remained focused on using available data to inform all of these decisions and employ evidence-based strategies and best practices wherever possible. When I assumed the position of CJCC coordinator, the first thing I noticed was how little we knew of each other, of what we did. So what we did is something very similar to what you're doing in this subcommittee, or this committee, is we, at every one of our council meetings for the first 3 or 4 years, we had a presentation by every department. And I think that's helped immensely and gave us a better understanding of what each other does. Another key point and undertaking of CJCC was to strive for continuous improvement. I've worked in the public protection system for approximately 36 years, and there's always been a tendency to ask for funding without a lot of strings attached, and when you talk about public protection. With the assistance and advisory oversight of a group like the CJCC, we provide input to departments as they move forward with projects or initiatives. The CJCC strives to provide this input utilizing data to make informed decisions. This hasn't come without some problems. I mean, providing data, what we found over the years was that a lot of departments have different records management systems or RMS systems. For instance, the district attorney has a system called Protect, and we have a new RMS system in the jail. So extracting data was problematic for a lot of these years. We are getting a new system in the county jail, or in our jail system in our sheriff's department, and I think that will help immensely. The jail, after they install the system, should improve data collection as people enter the facility so we can better deal with emergent situations like detox or mental health concerns. In summary, I'd like to say that all of our meetings are open to the public and have attended in the past. The people who have attended in the past have commented how informative they are. The community justice system in St. Croix County is very complex, has a lot of moving parts. With the help of a group like the CJCC, we've been able to remain civil with one another as we attempt to pull in one direction over the years. I find it a pleasure to serve this group. I always, over my career, thought it would be nice to be in a spot where we could move the needle occasionally when it makes sense. So that's my report. Are there any questions?
I would just say that I would concur in everything Judge Needham said earlier about the good working relationships we have with the judges and all the subordinate staff. They are so gracious in working with us. If you have any questions, I would encourage our committee members to chat with Judge Needham and take advantage of his offer to go along for a judicial bench ride. It's a great experience. Mr. O'Keefe is an extraordinary resource to us. I would just ask him 2 quick questions. Could you just really define 2 terms you used, TAD and Compass? And that would be my last question.
You asked. Compass actually stands for Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions. It's a program, it's an actuarial-based risk and needs assessment that was developed by a company called North Point, Inc. I think they're located in Michigan. The Wisconsin Department of Corrections purchased a licensure for that program and then offered it to the county system at no cost. So we used that free of charge. If we didn't use that program and we decided to use another one, we would have to pay for it. So actually, when I first started using it, I wasn't quite sure how it was going to fit into our system. But I think what it does a nice job of identifying risk of a person to reoffend. But there's a point where you've got to use professional judgment also. So when the judges are on the bench, it's just another tool in the toolbox for us. It does identify criminogenic needs. That's things like AODA, mental health, cognitive disorders, things like that. I think it does an excellent job of that. The other one is, you said TAD, I think. TAD, Treatment Alternatives and Diversion. That's our grant through the state. I think out of 72 counties, approximately 58 have taken advantage of this grant funding. And again, if you don't have a CJCC, you're not eligible to apply for it. Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions. Okay. And there's a lot of information on the internet about it. Yeah.
Does the committee have any questions for either Mr. O'Keefe or Judge Needham?
Mr. Chair, Mason.
Yes, Supervisor Hanson, I'm sorry.
For the judge, regarding drug court, without testing, will there be a little bit more grace when people come back if there's either of you? How's it going to work if somebody comes back and there's been problems? Is there going to be some leniency, or it just seems like a real soup?
There has been some testing going on. They have sweat patches, which you take off after a period of time, 2 weeks you can test. We have had testing. We have had the sheriff designee for the committee go out with to deliver oral fluid and sometimes urine tests to individuals. In terms of grace, these are extraordinary circumstances. They're acting, and I think the drug court team is acting in accordance with that. There has been a number of violations. There's been admissions. We've taken them into the terms of the sanctions. There hasn't been anyone terminated because of violations, and arguably there would have been persons terminated under normal circumstances. So yes, there's been that grace.
That's heartening. Thanks, Mike.
Any other questions? If there are none, if Mike's schedule, the district attorney's schedule will permit, I'm going to go quickly out of order to try to take care of Patty Schachner, who has to leave shortly. But I think Patty's report is going to be fairly short, and we'll get right to you. Okay, we'll turn to our medical examiner, Patty Schachner. Hi, good morning, Patty. I think you must be on mute. Patty, you're still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Okay. Good morning. I just wanted to give you a brief update to what's going on in the medical examiner's office since we last met. As you all know, the primary goal of the medical examiner's office is to determine cause and manner of death. The pandemic kind of threw a wrench into our operations, but with the help of the sheriff's office and facilities and administration and the county board, we were able to really make a really good conversion of our office in New Richmond, and it's really being utilized efficiently. Yesterday, we were able to utilize the showers, and everything that we had set up worked perfectly. So I want to thank the county board, public protection, and everybody that has helped us get the office set up to meet capacity for the pandemic. With that said, I went back and looked at the numbers. In 2019, we had 6 suicides, 11 accidental deaths, 2 undetermined, and 22 autopsies as of May 1st, 2019. As of May 1st of 2020, we have 5 suicides, 2 undetermined, 1 accidental death, and 9 autopsies. So you can see that once we start opening up, that behaviors are going to have an impact on the future when in regards to accidental deaths, particularly. And so I just wanted you to be aware of that. It's kind of an interesting statistic that I wasn't anticipating. So with that, we're at 222 cases this year. We're on pace, even though we don't have the accidents, our natural deaths and unexpected deaths are keeping us on pace with the projections that we have. So once activities start opening up, I think that we will see our numbers increase again based on risky behaviors, including traffic, drinking and driving, and high speed. So with that, that's what I have at this point. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Open it up to anybody having any questions. Patty joins us just about every month. We don't have a report from every department every month, and other duties that Patty has sometimes take her away. But we'll hear from her quite regularly and in great detail about some things. And we may have, depending on, don't want to put words in your mouth, but Patty had briefed us last year on some new technologies that may or may not be helpful to the county and may or may not be brought up to us again in the near term, but I'll just leave it at that. Any questions for our medical examiner? Thank you, Patty. I'll turn to our district attorney. I'm sorry. Patty, did you have a closing comment? I'll turn to our district attorney.
Good morning. First of all, the relationship between the state and the county and with the district attorneys is set out in Chapter 978. Prior to January 1st, 1990, the county paid for the district attorney's office. Every attorney, every staff, every pencil, piece of paper. In January 1st, 1990, which is that's 6 months after I started as an assistant DA, that changed. The state now takes care of certain responsibilities. Primarily, that's the attorney's salaries and benefits, and now the computer system. We have a separate case management system. It's statewide and uniform. Problem is, it has some interaction with CCAP, which is the court system, in terms of information that goes back and forth electronically, but they're not totally synced together. And the public defender has a separate system, and of course the sheriffs and all the law enforcement communities in the county have essentially a single case management system that's interrelated but controlled by their departments. In terms of breakdown, we have 4 persons in our victim witness office, 3 persons, one who is part-time in our diversion program, that's where our TAG grant goes to. We have 7 legal assistants, 1 office manager, and then we have 8 attorneys, including myself. 7 of those attorneys are full-time personnel who are paid by the state of Wisconsin. 1 is a part-time limited term position. We cut the numbers down in half in the budget for this year, who the county added back because we were roughly 3 attorneys short when we started having our overdose crisis about 6 years ago. That position has evolved. We've been able to take that position. We've made it part-time, and we've designated that individual because of their background and experience to do our juvenile matters. Juvenile matters, quite frankly, are split between ourselves and Corp Counsel doing termination of parental rights. we do what's called CHIPS, Children in Need of Services, Protective Services, and we do the delinquency matters. In terms of revenue, we have 2 grant positions. One is one of our diversion individuals whose money comes out of the TAG grant. We have a individual who is in our victim witness office who is a VOCA grant, that's violence against the women grant out of the feds. We've had that for probably over 15 years now. That's a regular reoccurring grant. As long as there's money, there's going to be that position. The state, in addition to that, pays roughly, historically it's been between 50 and 54%. Right now it's at 48% of the cost of victim witness services. So we get a reimbursement from them every quarter. It varies. Last year it was at 48%. I don't know what it'll be this year. I think we budgeted it at about that amount. In terms of it, our numbers are down slightly. The biggest change in our operation has been in terms of a couple of areas. Internally in the office, this forced us to go paperless. We're working remotely. Our attorneys, because of Zoom and to keep people out of the building, we have 2 attorneys coming in on a daily basis. Usually, as a matter of fact, there's 3 or 4 of us in, and everybody else working from home. We have had 2 staff persons coming in. Now we have 4. We have persons coming in from diversion and 2 or 3 persons coming in from victim witness. Paperless is the biggest change. It was forced upon us. It wasn't like most things in life. The anticipation was worse than the reality. We've managed to be able to do that. That's something I've wanted to do. There's been pushback from some of the staff to do it. The crisis forced us to do it. The numbers of arrests are down. We have fewer persons in custody every day. Our normal average was between 12 and 15 on a Monday, and that's because you have arrests from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're averaging probably less than 5 since this has happened. Part of that is a little discretion on law enforcement. We're reviewing felony arrests. There's a difference between a person who's arrested for a felony retail theft because they took a $600 vacuum cleaner from Target and the person who has put somebody in the hospital because they got drunk and beat up their spouse. So we're making a little different risk assessments. That's going through me through the courtesy of the judges. They've asked me to make those decisions on who to give notices and who to put into custody on those matters. That'll eventually change back to a certain degree, but that probably is a long-term process. In terms of it, the numbers are down, and I would say part of the reason is the courts have a history here of having pretrials, status hearings every 30 days to keep things moving. Those have been pushed out 45 to 60 days or longer rather than coming back immediately. So some of those numbers are down because some of those things have been eliminated because they don't move things along. How much of a backflow we'll have of that is unknown at this point. Last year we had approximately 800 felonies. About 50 of them are extraditions, which are someone's arrested here but they have a warrant in another state. Almost all of them are Minnesota, and they get sent back. We had about 800 misdemeanors. Misdemeanors in the state of Wisconsin are charges that the penalty is less than a year. Most misdemeanors are 9 months or 90 days by statute, but its penalties less than a year. Those matters are served in the county jail. Felonies are matters where the penalty, if it's given to be more than a year, is served in the Department of Corrections in the prison system. That was about 800. We have about 150 juvenile delinquencies. We have about 130 to 140 children in need of protective services. That number has been going up because, quite frankly, our law enforcement through the Sheriff's Department has been much more proactive in the area of drug-endangered children over the last couple of years. But quite frankly, that's because of the meth issue in this community has been going up. Human Services, the Sheriff's Department has taken the lead. We have more kids in those programs. And I anticipate that as we come out of this matter, we're going to have more work in that area, quite frankly. So that's the overview of the funding. As I stated, we have we have a total of 23 positions. 2 of them are paid by grant. Victim witness is half paid by the state. 7 of the attorneys are paid entirely by the state. The computer system is, like the judge said, because of all the prosecutors in the state are on the same system, and it's a security situation. It's paid by the state. They renew our computers about every 4 years. That's the basic overview of the financials and where we are today.
Any questions for the district attorney? Supervisor Hanson.
Mike, how many FTEs did you have with the ADAs?
I'm sorry.
How many full-time equivalencies do you have with your assistant district attorneys?
We have 7 individuals from the state. Recently was added a position in October from the governor, and then the county pays for a position. That position is budgeted at about $39,000 a year. The person uses he's in probably about 1,200 hours a year. So that's 60%, I would say.
7.75, 7.
Yeah, 7.6, 7.75.
Is that, and the answer is not automatically no, but is that enough?
In terms of the situation, the state review shows we probably need about 8.5. We're probably roughly a person short. But in terms of, because quite frankly, the quality of the persons I have in the office, and my attorneys are relatively inexperienced, and they quite frankly all look like kids to me. But the reality is we have a very experienced support staff. Almost everybody in my legal assistants, and 3 of the 4 in victim witness, and the lead in diversion, have been there since I started in this county 8 years ago. Lots of support. That helps us. We can manage our numbers because we are fortunate in this county. We don't have a high incident of violent crimes. Now, if that ever changes and is more reflective of, say, the areas in the southeast portion of the state, we don't have enough. We have enough people based upon the crimes we have. But if we were ever to have a year where we had 3 separate homicides, if we ever had a year where armed robberies, and that happened in the 90s, armed bank robberies became very prevalent, and ordinarily bank robberies are prosecuted by the feds. Well, they've stopped prosecuting that, and that's all fallen. They really don't. That falls on local prosecutors. If that were to change, or if we would start having car thefts based on initiations with gangs, we don't have a gang situation in this community. If you go over across the river, you'll see neighborhoods that are just completely gang tagged, spray painted. We don't have that. You don't see that in the alleys and streets and houses and buildings here. If that changes, we're really short. If our current demographics in terms of the nature of the crimes we have remains the same, we'll handle it with who we have.
Over the course of time, I'll look forward to learning all of the grants that you apply for and what the grant cycle is, and I'm sure that you do a good job with that. But and I know that there's a frustration because we never get enough, and that there's always more on the horizon. But
the grant cycle really is tied right now into the TAD. We've looked at some other things, and we have the VOCA grant, which is really renewable. There's not too many grants for prosecutors right now. That used to come out of a thing called the Byrne grant. Those have essentially died away. And they're for things like gang crime, specialization in certain areas. They come with a lot of strings, which takes up flexibility. And when you're an office of our size, flexibility, the ability to have persons walk out of their grant assigned position into another courtroom to do something else is necessary.
Look forward to learning all that. Thank you.
And with that, if I may be, unless there's any more questions, may I be excused, Mr. Chair? I've got a couple of things, including.
Absolutely.
some
Thank
other
you for being
matters.
with us. And as you leave, I'm just going to make an observation, and that is that typically we have an orientation for the new members, and that it's going to be done by Zoom next week with Ken. But I know Mike has been very gracious in the past about also inviting this committee, particularly to join him in his office, just to meet some of his staff, see how they work, answer specific questions you might have about the various departments he mentioned in his comments. Yeah, yes. So we're delaying that until early supper at least. Thanks, Mike. I'll now turn to the sheriff, Sheriff Knudsen. And thank you, Judge Needham, for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to probably roll over some familiar statistics for a couple on the board. I'm going to take some numbers from the 2019 year-end report that was given to the county board and also this Public Protection Committee. First, I just want to say that I'll echo Judge Needham's comments about, I think, a good working relationship with mutual respect that we've had over the years. I also speak with many other sheriffs, and they do not share some of the good communication that we have and that respect that we have in the county. So I need to echo his sentiment as well, that I'd have to say we are in the minority of how things operate with other government bodies within the state. The sheriff's office is broken down into three divisions, and the sheriff derives his statutory authority or his statutory duties from Wisconsin Statute 59.27. There are certain things in there that the sheriff is responsible for and required to do. One of those is the jail. One of those is tending to the courts. There's some issues or some things tied with water, body recovery. There's about 6 or 7 things that entails. And as Judge Needham mentioned about the separation of branches, I'm in the executive branch, while the judge is in the judicial branch. And so the three divisions within the sheriff's office are corrections, are newly, at the first of the year, we also, under the umbrella of the sheriff's office, we took on emergency communications and emergency management. And that was something that back, I think, in probably the early 80s was separated out from under the then sheriff Laverne Berkey. And now here this last January 1st, we've brought them back together, mainly to combine resources. We're next to each other in the hall. Much of our daily activities are intertwined, and it surely made sense to move back to that structure. There are 24 staff members associated with the emergency telecommunicators group. Some of the numbers from 2019, and the phone calls coming into the telecommunications center, they received 105,375 calls last year. Of those, the 911 calls were 31,758. Of those 105,000, a CAD card or an incident card was created 95,518 times, which means it was assigned out to one of the 36 different agencies that the communication center dispatches for. All those agencies are not only law enforcement with each municipality, sheriff's office, Wisconsin State Patrol, 1 year, but also the first responders, EMS, ambulance services, DNR, park services, a whole host of different entities that the dispatch center works with on a daily basis. So they're quite active in there, and several of you have been in there just to see that their workload, their caseload, also some of the areas. And that area was reconstructed and refigured several years ago, expanded, again, through the support of the county board. They recognized that the area that was built in 1993 was surely not sufficient for the call load and the number of staff that worked within that small facility. So that is one division. That division, with them bringing them back under, created a captain's position. Captain Brent Standard is in the room as well. He oversees that group, along with the help of Terry Anderson, who has been with the sheriff, been with the county, now under the sheriff, but he's been with the county for 26 years. And Janet also keeps things rolling in there and keeps everyone on task. So that's a well-run group. The corrections portion of the jail, or the corrections portion of the sheriff's office, I'll go through this numbers we currently have right now. And Judge Needham and Mike Nieskus discussed pre-COVID and today. Our average daily population, which will be our ADP, I'll refer to, in January of this year, we were 100 on the average. April, we were at 63. So when COVID hit, we truly utilized electronic monitoring, GPS, but only on those low-risk public safety individuals. And we've had many conversations with Judge Needham, the other judges, and the district attorney of really making sure that we continue to weigh out public health and public safety, and that there is a big difference. While they intermingle of individuals, there's a big difference that we still have to make sure public safety is at the forefront of the jobs that we do. But again, also taking the individual, also looking at their maybe high-risk health, if they're in a category that may have made it more appropriate for them to be housed elsewhere or at home, or the electronic monitoring. That's proven some challenges, and DA Nieskus had mentioned that with some violations that we've had to go to residences and do testing, some that we've brought back into the jail because they were just not compliant. So that has changed how we do business as well. Sadly, more house calls, as I'll put them. Some of the other statistics on jail population averages. Now, I talked about January being 100. For the last several years, we have seen an uptick and an increase in our average daily population. The average daily population in 19 was 123. In 18 was 119. In 17 was 103. So we've progressively been going up. And I believe there was even a day last summer we were at 151, which really got us thinking about our ability to house, if we had enough space going forward, and what the 5-year, 10 years looked like. Utilizing some of those those electronic monitoring. We're putting more Hubers out, which is releasing some of that population. But again, once they're out, that also takes staff to monitor and make sure their GPSs, they're staying out of inclusion or exclusion zones, monitoring their, if they have the alcohol bracelet, if they're going to test on that. So that's taken some other different strategical challenges that the sheriff's office has had. In 2019, we booked into the jail approximately 2,900 individuals. Those were people through the back door that were booked in. It could either have been a book and release that may have been held for court, that may have been held for bond. We can house Our capacity is, I believe it's 184, and because of, we can only do a certain portion of that, it's 176, I believe, that we can house when we are at capacity. One of the, while my authority comes under 59.27, the jail works under Department of Corrections 350, which we call DOC 350. That really guides how jails are operated, not only construction and structure, but hygiene, sanitation, medical, and we are inspected yearly by the state of Wisconsin. So we follow those guidelines as far as housing as well. Within the jail, it's really a little city where meals, laundry, medical, haircuts, schooling, everything takes place right within that facility. One of the challenges we've had over the recent years, and all of our time was spent prior to COVID, was on substance abuse and mental health. Well, that hasn't gone away. That's really now taken a back seat for a lot of our attention, but it's still there, and we're still dealing with some of the struggles with that. We have increased our mental health person that comes in to speak with the inmates from 24 to 32 hours per week. That's available to inmates. That seems to be helping. The other thing that we really try to work with is our jail volunteer program. That those individuals come in, members of the community. I believe there's 70-some members that donate time, come in to teach, or with certain classes that they go through, money matters, maybe some family dynamic classes. Last year, the volunteer hours put forth by the community was 1,144 volunteer hours. Inmates attended one of the classes offered in the jail 6,555 times. So the inmates strongly they get out of the cell blocks, they interact. It's really good for them to work through some of the issues they have, helps them with resources. One of the things we're also going to be working on is assigning someone to a jail programs coordinator. I know Chairman Fiedler has been very interested in that program getting up, and it helps people get, again, those resources instead of they come in, they serve their time, at the end, out the door they go, in essence, to fend for themselves and find a job and find housing, and we're hoping to bridge that gap with this jail programs coordinator. I think it's going to be a great benefit to help those folks hit the ground in a little better shape when they get out, and our long-term hope is that it helps reduce recidivism. The Day Report Center, which was mentioned by Judge Needham, our average drug test per day in 2019 was 32. Average phone contacts was 10. So when people come in with their average drug tests per day, those are actual urine tests or mouth swab tests. But also there's a group that comes in and they use the AB kiosk, which is the breathalyzer test. So at any given day, we were operating around 50, 51 people walking through the door daily, 6 days a week. Obviously, COVID changed a lot. And as Judge Needham mentioned, we are now up at the Services Center in Richmond on a much reduced, for everybody's separation and health reasons. So we're trying to get back into that accountability for those individuals. We have noted whether there's any correlation. I guess the future holds some information there, but some of our property crimes have increased. It'll be interesting to see if those individuals involved in these property crimes and thefts are also people that maybe had those issues in the past, were on bond, fell back into substance abuse, and the substance abuse is driving their need for some of these property crimes. So we're going to keep watching that. Some of the Day Report Center, I think, has been, it was opened in 2015. We recognized that, and the courts recognized that when people were placed on bond, there was no way to track them. The courts thought we were going door to door. We surely didn't have the staff manpower or the information on who and what and where. The Day Report Center has been, I think, a great addition for the public safety and for the system in and of itself, and hoping, and we've had several that have been required to report to Day Report that have really appreciated being held accountable, because that was their time to get sober. And I think that's important as well, that we're getting that feedback. So 2019, there were 624 people that were placed on bond and required to report to the Day Report Center. Some interesting numbers. 457 of those people had 0 bail bond violations. 81 people had 1 bail bond. 35 people had 2. 15 had 3, 10 had 4. But we get down towards a certain group of individuals. 3 people had 6, 3 had 7, 1 had 9, 1 had 13, and 1 had 15 bail jumping referrals. So by and large, the number of people required to report to the Day Report Center were compliant, were successful in keeping up with their bond, their reporting. So I think when we look at the total number of failed tests, it's not one individual failing. It's not a group of individuals on that percentage, but there's a small group that have used up a lot of those bail jumping referrals. So I think that's important to know that it has been a success. I think we have a 91% success rate out of that bail jumping. So that's important. Field services, probably our most visible group, and that's our patrol unit. We had about 20,000 calls for service, 21,000 calls for service last year. We have referred 577 misdemeanors, 462 felony cases for the year 2019. Search warrants applied for was 146, but the search warrants from what we thought of 15, 20 years ago of going to houses, now those search warrants, many of those are search warrants for electronics that are seized during investigations. 21, I believe it was 21,000 calls for service for the sheriff's office. So the search warrants, many of them are now done downstairs in our forensic lab. There's more computer forensics involved than in years past. Our average over the last 5 years was 347 devices that we have done search warrants on. Those are all cell phone extractions, and each one of those cell phone extractions then requires somebody to analyze the data, the pictures, the photos, the text, the messages, which is hours and hours of review, documentation, and picking out what's important to the case that we are investigating. St. Croix River, also part of our patrol unit. We logged 687 hours of patrol on the river last year. Very active, one of the more active boat patrols actually in the state of Wisconsin. I think we're third in some of our, second or third in our statistics for enforcement, but mainly that is due to the St. Croix River being so very busy. The amount of traffic and people that visit there continues to increase each year. Courts statutorily falls under the sheriff's office, so we have transports. One of the things that we have discussed many times over the years is mental health transports, emergency detentions, I believe last year we had 131 emergency detentions. 50 of those went to Winnebago across the state. It's a 5-hour trip there, a 5-hour trip back. And that doesn't count the time at the hospital for clearance, which can take up to, we've had people sit there for 8, 10, 12 hours. While tests are run, people get sober, drugs work out of their systems. So rarely do the first officers contacting that person at a residence also transport them. It is, if anything, a 15 to 24-hour process to get them to Winnebago or to their destination. Obviously, if it's Eau Claire, it's much less time because of drive time, but we still have the medical clearance that takes place. That has put a strain on this office. If, for example, Hudson Emergency Detention somebody gets them to Winnebago, if there's a court hearing that takes place, the sheriff is responsible for all transports to the courts, tending to every court hearing. So the sheriff has to go down and retrieve for any state warrant, any emergency detention. So I think
Sheriff, if I could jump in for just a second. You did note appropriately that had been a topic of this committee many, many times. And I just want to echo everything the sheriff just said. It is a huge problem. It is an unbelievably huge problem. Very, very costly in terms of personnel and money. It is just astronomical. And earlier in this year, we just made the comment that was going to be one of the focuses, it had to be one of the focuses of this committee this term. So that becomes our mutual problem. And I would just suggest maybe if the sheriff, we will have to look at it. There's just no question about it. Maybe for a following month, maybe in June, if we wanted to hear in greater detail from the sheriff, because this can go on for hours and hours. Believe me, this is very complicated because it's criminal and civil and many, many different entities involved and extremely emotional, very hard on the officers and very hard on the poor folks that have to go 5 hours back and forth, at least. And very hard on the court system, very hard on just everybody involved. Corp counsel is very much involved in this. So, Sheriff, if you think that that's a worthwhile suggestion, maybe we could come back and focus on that in one of our next few meetings and really go through this, because I think we really need to try to at least make progress in this area if we can't solve it, because there's so many moving parts. I don't think we can solve it quickly, but I think we can make progress on it. Please proceed. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. And now with COVID and having to outfit and separate, put plastic, so the air isn't moving, and we have some challenges, and again, we are very fortunate. We have not had an emergency detention with somebody with the virus yet. We had some concerns, and there was even talk that Mendota wouldn't accept. We've been told that that's not the case, that they will, but we were preparing. We didn't know. None of the prison system is accepting any inmates now. So anybody that is convicted and sentenced to prison, the prison system is not taking inmates. So some of our numbers are those awaiting to go to prison, and there's going to be a backlog getting those down to their destinations as well. So lots of challenges. Transports for 2019, we had 437 inmate transports. So that's a lot of road time, and those long trips are not usually just one person, there are two people. So that was a lot of information I threw at you. A lot of statistics.
Sure, if I could just jump in real quickly. Status of the construction of the 10 special cells?
Seems to be moving along and very close to being on target. Some of the walls have been removed. The pod area is worked on, and we surely hope by this fall, November, for completion. One thing that was brought up earlier was the RMS system, the records management system. That we hope to have December to have that up and running. The current one we have, as Mr. O'Keefe had mentioned, extracting data from that. I was trained on that in 1999 when I worked in the jail. The system is still the same, and trying to extract data that we would now need for CJCCs is nearly impossible to get crystal reports going. Very tedious, so I do hope that this will really help, again, some guidance on where we should be putting our resources for CJCC.
Just background for the committee. I know Supervisor Hanson knows this, but for the new members, last year the county board approved a roughly $8 million bond issue. About half of that was for improvements in the jail, much of that for 10 specialized cells to deal with folks who do have drug problems or mental health issues. And that was both for the safety of the inmates and the safety of the jail personnel. We saw some very vivid videos that reflected the worst aspects of what can go on in a jail when a person who's not mentally able becomes violent. And so that, I think that was a unanimous vote or close to it of the board, and hopefully by the end of this year we'll be able to more appropriately and safely handle those people. Any questions from members of the committee to Sheriff Knudsen? Sheriff Knudsen.
I know I've gone over my 10 minutes, and I apologize, I didn't talk about 25 or. Emergency management also falls under the sheriff's office now. Natasha Cardinal has done a wonderful job. She's also got one staff member underneath her assisting her. He's half emergency management, half health and human services. I believe they share. And again, she's done a wonderful job of spinning a lot of plates over the last 2 months as well. And that falls under the captain of the patrol division.
Any questions from the committee?
Could I ask just a real quick one?
Mr.
Sheriff,
O'Keefe.
where are we at with the open records requests for body cam videos? I mean, are you getting lots of requests for body cam?
We actually are. So we had repurposed a position for an open, or for a records management person. And that person is actually Mike Longacre, and he started probably a month ago now. So he's been handling open records for the dispatch center, 911 calls, as well as the body cam video, as well as any video that comes out of the jail on the overhead. So he's been staying very busy with that. That has reduced a lot of time from Terry Anderson filling open records, Brent Standard open records, and it's actually been quite a benefit for us, so thank you.
He was a great newspaper reporter. What a great hire.
Yeah, he was. He's been really good for us, so thank you.
Any other questions for the sheriff?
I had a question.
Please, Kathy.
How are you doing on PPE for you and your team? Do you have enough supply? I'm assuming that in a lot of cases you have to assume that wherever you may go, somebody might have COVID, right?
Yeah, so we've all of our patrol and our jail have the N95 masks. There are N95 masks that need to be fitted, so all the patrol has been fitted with those. There's a KN95 mask that doesn't need to be fit tested. The jail staff has those. All inmates have been given surgical masks, so when they are booked in, they get those masks. All patrol and jail have been given coveralls, face shields. Goggles are extremely hard to come by. We've had homemade masks dropped off, which I have on right now. So we are one of many that have orders out there that have been out there for months. We were just notified yesterday. A bunch of our surgical masks were canceled because of short supply, no supply, vendor fell off, whatever it might be. So that has been a struggle. Right now we have everybody equipped. If we get into a lot of incidences with the virus, of course, that's going to drain that supply pretty quick. So right now, we're sitting workable, and we're just hoping that more things don't happen. So, but thank you for asking.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the sheriff? Thank you again, Sheriff, and I would add that once a year, by law, we have to take a tour of the jail, and it's a very informative tour, and the sheriff and his staff do a great job. I'm sure that the sheriff also would probably extend an invitation to anybody who would be interested in doing a special tour before our annual tour, which typically would be about February or so. If anybody would like to join him, I'm certain, given past experience, he would be more than happy to take you on a tour of the jail. It really is quite an experience, and as he said, it's a mini city down there.
And my hope, Mr. Chair, is that upon completion of the special needs cells, prior to having individuals placed in there, it may be a good idea if we can maybe set it up for a meeting to get you guys down there to walk in and out and see the actual conditions from inside the cells. I think that would be beneficial as well. So,
Thank you. I'm sure we'll take you up on that once we get past the initial crisis of the COVID. Next item of business is future items for the agenda, and I certainly want to entertain that. I would simply say that I really want to be very responsive to anything people, as we go along through the year, want to have taken up. We talked about a few things today that might come up, but Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will ask, and I spoke with Mr. O'Keefe about this earlier, that we have a conversation about a program called Stepping Up, a national initiative to reduce the number of people with mental health illness in jails, which is a national association of counties, American Psychiatric Association Foundation, and the Council of State Governments Justice Center program, which has been used effectively in Dunn County and I believe about 50 other counties across the nation. I'd like to just take a look at it as a committee next month with consideration of sending it to the Subcommittee for Mental Health, JCC, Subcommittee for Mental Health. And I would hope that we could put that on the agenda, and thank you.
We certainly can do that. Any other suggestions for the near term? What I try to do during the month is ask the various folks we've just heard from if they have any particular issues they'd like to bring up. We don't hear from everybody every month. For example, next month we'll hear from Child Support and the Clerk of Court because we just didn't have time today to fit all the departments in, but we'll get those two other major entities to come in June. And as I mentioned, Supervisor Hanson brought up one element of mental health. That's going to be something that we'll definitely have to look at some point. Last year, I know this committee, it wasn't exactly an official committee function, but the sheriff, several of the judges, the district attorney, a number of people from our Health and Human Services area, all participated in a substance abuse conference. And it was a very general conference to go over issues facing St. Croix County with the thought that maybe we would review if there were any specific issues and we might want to try to make that a recurring event at some point. Basically, it was a no cost to the county event other than the wonderful folks that we had from the county participating in the event. One last thing I would say that I know I'm personally going to bring up tomorrow at the ADRC meeting, I sit on that council, is I believe we have either now or the potential in the very near future to have some very serious problems with our elderly with regard to particularly financial and legal abuse of them. I'm not talking physical abuse at this point. And so I've talked with people like the district attorney's office, and they have a task force on the elderly that has been put together at the state level and that we're functioning in. And I've talked to a number of other folks, and I'm thinking that probably we will hear more about this, and I believe the ADRC will endorse what I'm saying, and we will bring in people from the social services area, the banking community, the legal community, the judicial community, the prosecutors, and my goal is to do something on focusing on what the scope of the problem is with elder abuse and what we can do about it, and perhaps do something in September. With that, I have nothing else. Janet, do you have anything? So we don't have any further announcements or correspondence, and unless there's any other comment from anybody, because we really try to run this fairly informally, so if you have an alibi you'd like to get in now, please do so. Otherwise, we're adjourned. Thank you.